Fryderyk Chopin, an astrological portrait by Ciro Discepolo. In 1810, Chopin, Schumann, and de Musset were born. A year later, Liszt came into the world, and in 1813, Verdi and Wagner gave their first cry, an exceptional period for music. 175 years later, today, 1985, marks another great anniversary for the musical world. The 300th anniversary of the births of Bach, Handel, and Scarlatti. This is why 1985 has been proclaimed the year of music, and for this reason we too have decided for once to focus on music in these pages. We have chosen the theme of Fryderyk Chopin, the poet of poets, one of the greatest musical geniuses of all time, and certainly the most popular musician in the world and in the history of humanity. He was born in Zelazowa Wola, a small farming town near Warsaw, on March 1st, 1810, at 6 p.m. The official date of his birth, according to civil records, is February 22nd, but Bernard Gavotti, historian and music critic, author of a beautiful biography of the Polish musician, clarifies the true date of birth. Although the baptismal certificate lists his birth date as February 22nd, the family celebrated his birthday on March 1st. Pietro Rattalino, Chronology of the Life of Fryderyk Chopin, in Chopin tells Chopin, Rome, Bari, Giuseppe Laterza, 2011, ISBN 8858101774. The son of Nicholas Chopin and Justynia Krzyzanowska, was therefore born with the sun in Pisces conjunct Venus-Pluto and descendant, with the ascendant in Virgo and the moon in Capricorn. We therefore have a strong Pisces-Virgo opposition axis. The latter sign is particularly strong due to the presence of the stellium in the 6th house, a stellium led by the sun. As is well known, the 6th house is co-significant with Virgo. Whenever we find ourselves faced with an axis of opposing sun-ascendant values, we must proceed carefully to determine which of the two prevails. In our experience in such cases, there's almost never a balancing reset, but rather a marked shift toward one of the two signs. In other words, either the sun or the ascendant ends up compensating and emphasizing the opposing values. In our horoscope, therefore, we could have either very Pisces values or very Virgo values. The latter prevailed because the ascendant usually guides behavior, and the house hosting the sun has a significant impact on the individual's psychology. Here too we have a moon in Capricorn, which, acting as Libra's needle in the attribution of Pisces-Virgo values, tends to decisively shift the balance toward the earth values of the 6th zodiac sign. For those unconvinced, let's examine some aspects of the great musician in light of Gavotti's biography and other surviving written accounts of the Polish composer. First, the hands. Yes, the hands. They are all of Chopin, or a large part of him. The musical wonders that emanated from his playel pianos are due primarily to the extraordinary manual skill with which he conversed with the keys of his favorite instrument. He was a child prodigy who enchanted everyone with his skill and made headlines even before publishing a polonaise at the age of 8 for the mastery with which he mastered his instrument. How can we not agree with Lisa Morpurgo when she theorizes that his hands are astrologically Virgo as opposed to his feet Pisces? Here too, of course, the law of compensation applies. A balanced Pisces, i.e., a strong Virgo, tends to be more distinguished by their hands than their feet. And here's what his most authoritative biographer tells us about his upper limbs. Pianist's hands, long, delicate fingers, clearly separated from the bass, with prominent joints and tendinous ligaments. Two powerful hands, therefore, suited to his art. Two hands that stood out on a body that was also Virgon. At 1.70 meters tall, he never exceeded 50 kilos. He had the grace, the leanness, the very distinguished bearing of Virgo, everything that made him, according to his friend Liszt, the prince among princes. He always dressed elegantly, Virgo and sixth house values, and was hailed in the Parisian salons he frequented for more than 16 years as a true dandy. He also had the Virgon sense of perfection, fueled by a constant critical and self-critical impulse. He repeated and repeated until exhaustion. At 12, his teacher Ziuni declared, "I have nothing more to teach him." And he, by virtue of the aforementioned virtues, criticized with all his might. As a child, he hurled his poisonous darts at the many figures that colored his imagination and enriched an extraordinary anthology of caricatures with which the young Chopin amused his friends and relatives. As an adult, he was harsh in his judgments, especially toward his fellow musicians. He never appreciated any composer of his time, but only the greats of the 18th century. But we have other valid arguments to demonstrate the prevalence of Virgo values in his horoscope, starting with health. As many know, the sixth house and the sign of Virgo are particularly linked to medicine, treatments, health, and general attention to one's body. So, what are we to make of the fact that he owned a cabinet full of medicines, and that in Paris alone he was treated by 14 doctors? His biography is dotted with ointments, salves, syrups, homeopathic remedies, as well as recipes, harsh and futile prescriptions, diagnoses of all kinds, medical consultations, worsenings, relapses, and relapses. Virgo was also a strong personality trait in other important aspects of his personality. Little inclined to the pleasures of the flesh, passionate only in spirit, prey to an innate shyness. And again, regarding the habitual nature of the sign he so strongly represented, he was a man of imperious habits, and every change, no matter how small, was a terrible event in his life. He even had the green thumb that distinguishes many born under the sixth sign of the zodiac, and agoraphobia, which for him meant a fear of large halls and concerts in very large venues. The sixth house is that of small spaces. Being a compensated Pisces, he stood out for his atheism, which was broken only at the point of death, in a moment of evident internal turmoil, and under the pressure of family and friends who came to his bedside to urge him to do so. However, even though crushed by the 30 degrees of opposition, a Pisces matrix still lived within him, and to it we undoubtedly owe the creative genius that Virgo is not. His musical inventions, the romanticism that inspired him, the poetry that guided his pen on the score, were undoubtedly shared by the 12th sign of the zodiac. His patriotic sentiments, he always helped exiled Poles like himself, and the selflessness with which he nursed George Sand at the Nohant estate in the Berry countryside were also called Pisces. The writer just mentioned introduces us to another important chapter in our friend's life, love. As every good astrology book teaches, Venus in the sixth house almost always signifies love with a workmate, and here too we find the musician's great passion for the singer Konstanz Gladkowska. This passion, however, came to nothing, as Chopin never declared his love, and she married another man. His infatuation with Maria Wodzinska had a similar outcome, and he marked her correspondence with the words "Moja bieda," my sorrow. The only true love of his life in the sense of a concrete experience was with the writer George Sand, but it was still a love with little love, at least sexually. Federico Chopin to his lover was unmanly, almost frigid. This is undoubtedly the most critical point in interpreting his astrological chart. Mars in Aries, in the house of sex, the eighth, magnificently aspected, should suggest a healthy stallion. But let's not forget what was said earlier, that he was very much a Virgo, and therefore also a Virgo in this aspect of his life. He expressed his strong Mars in the enormous energy he poured into concerts and public performances. During one of the last, he collapsed. And let's not forget that his sexuality was also curtailed by illness, tuberculosis, which undermined him from a very young age, and which doctors treated for laryngitis. But even if the diagnosis had been correct, the results, given the times, would not have changed. Chopin died prematurely, at just 39 years old, after composing 17 polonaises, 57 mazurkas, 2 concertos, various works for piano and orchestra, 3 piano sonatas, 4 ballades, 4 scherzos, 26 preludes, 14 waltzes, 27 etudes, 19 nocturnes, 4 improvisations, 4 rondos, 19 melodies, and various other pieces. He could have produced so much more, but to the despair of music lovers of all ages, he abandoned this earthly existence because, at the time, only a few vials of penicillin were in short supply. Ciro Discepolo, from the book How to Discover the Secrets of a Horoscope, published by Albero, 1988.